week? These are from the attorneys.
We got one on fiduciary, but not
This ain't the right one. These are right. Chris,
Yes, sir.
can you speak to this before we start? On the Blair subdivision.
Yes, sir.
We got one short. Okay, they can share.
We got a letter from the developer on this issue, pointing out the fact that the 60 days under state law has expired this particular development. And I think as most people in the room, maybe not all the audience understand, but under 33-113, Planning Commission has 60 days to approve a plat, preliminary plat. Otherwise, you're forced to approve it. There's a long history, and all you know, this matter's come up at least 2 or 3 times before the commission, and it was just put off. There's some arguments that could be made that at least one of those times it was put off, and with some consent from the developer, that they would provide additional information about the ownership of certain part of the property. But the problem is, we've never done it, but your ordinance requires it. That to extend the time, you need to have that in writing. Your ordinance says the 60 days can be waived if requested by the developer. And if so, it must be obtained in writing. So since this was matter that was submitted first back in, whatever it was, April 14th or May 4th at the commission, the 60 days is clearly expired. This is another one. My sympathies are with the neighbors here. But I think if there's any good news, is that this particular subdivision, I think, would meet your current ordinance. It would meet the new ordinance. May not meet all the new procedures, but it would meet the current ordinance. But I don't think you have much choice but to say and consider the fact that the 60 days is run. So that's just, yes, sir. I'll answer your question.
Yeah, are we gonna allow public input?
This is gonna depend on what we decide that we're gonna do with the application of the state law. Derek.
I got it. Is this project under construction?
Yes.
Okay. What about 125 2C?
25 what day?
2C.
25, 2C.
The old ordinance or the current?
Either one.
It hadn't changed?
That hadn't changed.
Yes, sir. That's right.
So as of the last meeting, July 13th, it didn't meet the ordinances for us to even hear or consider approving this.
Say that again, Derek?
Well, and that's the point I tried to make at the last meeting, that we really shouldn't have even been hearing this because they don't meet the ordinances for being heard. Because any ordinances that are put into place apply when we hear this. And as of that meeting, we should have seen, traffic impact studies, they're more, the new ordinances were put in place, I believe, was it June 8th? Was the,
And they had to have a deed signed, and they didn't have that signed.
All right, you make a good point, and that's a valid argument, and I considered that. And that might have been a reason to deny it last time. But it didn't get denied last time. It got no action. So as a result, the 60 days continued to run. But going back to your underlying point, I'm told by the engineers it does meet the new ordinance. It might not meet the new procedure. You can only apply the things that are about health, safety, and welfare. You can change the rules midstream. The when you submit this, when you submit that, when the hearing is, that's procedural. You can't change the procedure with somebody once it's started. But you can, say, impose a more significant health reason. That's what you could do. And I think this project will have to meet those new ordinances about all the new rules about storm retention, et cetera, et cetera. So I think your choice today is, I think you probably need to take action on this because the law says the planning commission shall issue an approval. The director can't issue that. The president of this commission can't issue that because he can only take action if it's been approved by your commission. So I think you need a motion. Well, the first thing you got to see if there's a motion and there are votes to weigh in on the 60-day rule. If that fails, then a motion would be appropriate to either approve or deny the plat.
Can I say something about the 60-day rule?
Sure.
When we met on June the 6th, the developer asked at least, and the attorney, at least 5 times for a deferral. Okay, he came up to the podium, basically begged for one, did you not, Mr. Attorney?
I did, we're counting those days.
Okay, starting June 6th. Okay, you also waived the 60 days at that point in time. Mr. Murphy stood right there and told Mr. Cascio, I waived the 60 days. Mr. Burns asked Mr. Cascio if the 60 days was gonna come into play, because otherwise it probably would have been denied, but Mr. Cascio told him no. They asked him for a deferral, it's going to be waived the 60 days. So, therefore, Mr. Burns thought a deferral was gonna be okay. Okay, Mr. Babcock made a motion to defer based on our attorney's opinion. That's who we have to depend on, is you.
Right. But the ordinance requires that deferral to be, that waiver be in writing. Your ordinance says it must be in
But
writing.
we were influenced,
Right.
our vote was basically influenced by what we were told by the attorney.
Exactly. It could have been deferred, it could have been waived.
It should have been denied.
Well, but you could have denied it.
I know, but that's what I said to do, because I knew this was gonna come back and bite us in the butt.
Yeah.
You know, I'm just saying that, you know, I think we were given bad advice, and it affected, it's gonna affect, your bad advice, your law firm's bad advice
The
to
advice
us
was
that
sound.
night.
What didn't happen was the signed waiver.
No. We would have gotten a sign waiver, but we were told that we didn't have to because the 60, we were never told anything about a sign waiver.
Right.
We were told, no, it's not, no big deal. At the end of the meeting, Mr. Joe even addressed Mr. Attorney before we took the vote. He said, do you understand that if we grant your deferral, that the 60 days is no longer in play?
I get it, and that's a
And we
good,
even discussed that after the meeting.
But you hung your hat, along with their attorney, last month on the fact
I did,
that
no.
yes ma'am, you brought the Robert's Rules of Order and you said that the deferral was not legal. He stood right at that podium and said the deferral that we did was not legal because we didn't have it signed. So if that deferral
I
wasn't
didn't say
legal,
that.
then it didn't stop the clock. And that's what you said last month.
And what I was told is that it has never been required to be in writing before, that the council has accepted the deferral and that the writing requirement was irrelevant, so to speak.
But that's not what you said during, you fought at the end of the meeting and said that this deferral was not legal. That's what you hung your hat on the whole time.
I stated that the request, it states in the ordinance that the deferral must be placed in writing. Everybody that argued against that it had to be in writing stated that we have never required that before. The deferral is valid. It is because we've never needed it to be in writing for any other council meeting that's ever proceeded.
Mr. Moon, whether it was done right or not.
Right.
Tell me, I mean, I need a.
well, you know, this is another unfortunate thing. This has never come up in the 10 years that I've been here. We've never had the 60 days catch us before. It was always understood that if you asked for it to be deferred, it would be deferred. But whenever we start, you know, being hyper-technical about it, we have to accept the fact that that's in your ordinance. you know, we were looking at it in state law, but your ordinance is even tougher. But look, if you disagree with that, you have total right to say, no, I'll vote that there's 60 days, it's not run, and you can still consider it a denial, so.
Well, we're gonna ask them for the deferral and I get the
Right.
advice I got from the attorney. I mean, I don't think the 60-day
Then
run.
within your prerogative to vote against the motion that the 60 days is passed.
Yes, sir.
Yeah.
May I speak here?
Yes, sir.
Yep. Correct me if I'm wrong. Our ordinances state that we have 10 days to answer, written. The state law says we have 60 days.
Your own law says
So
60.
we have ordinance and state law.
Your own law
That's
says 60.
10 days dealing with minor subdivision.
Okay, I'm sorry. 60 days. 60 days on the ordinances, and we have to do it in writing for the first. And we have 60 days per state law. And if we do not make a motion either way on it, it's automatic by state law approved.
It says, the state law says the commission shall approve the plat, if no action is taken within 60 days. And the other problem is your ordinance also says the 60 days starts when they submit it to the department. You know, we've always taken this, that the 60 days starts when it first hits this commission. The ordinance is more generous than
I
that.
think that's what Mr. Burns' question was at that
Yeah.
meeting. If you voted to defer, was it going to affect the 60 days?
Right.
And he was told no, because they asked for a
With the
deferral.
consent, that would not have been a problem, that's correct.
You know, all due respect, I don't remember asking that question just
Oh,
like
it's on
that.
video.
Yeah.
Just like that.
Well, I
wouldn't have done that, but Joe, you ready for a motion?
Pardon me?
Are you ready for a motion?
Well,
No.
When you consider that and because some
Derek,
of the stated
I'll let him say
minutes,
something.
is that not?
You got 15 minutes if you wanna speak it?
I don't even want that.
Joe, you opening up?
You gotta open it. Open the floor.
It's a
Joe,
good
Yeah.
sound argument.
Yeah, and
Are you
then.
Yes.
opening it up to the public for conversation?
Yeah, I guess if we're gonna make a motion, then
Well, you gotta get a motion first.
all right, let's get the motion first, then we'll open up the discussion.
Based upon, the letter from the attorney representing the developer, Mr. Michael B. Clegg, he makes the point that in May of this year, this planning commission deferred this development. In June, this development was deferred again by this planning commission. And in July, we took no action, so I've been knowing about this state law for a long time. Actually, they teach this state law in, the classes that we go to on being a planning commission. And I think everybody who went to that, they teach this, so I've known about it a long time. So based upon that, the 60 days has expired. Now, the planning commission didn't take action, neither did the council. So I think that what Mr. Clegg is saying about the RS 33-113 is accurate. So I'm gonna make a motion based upon the, Louisiana Revised Statute 33.113, that I make a motion to approve the preliminary site plan of Lowry subdivision.
I got a motion and a second, now we'll open this floor up for discussion, it's 15 minutes of discussion total on each side.
Can I ask one question? I understand what you're saying about design ordinances, you can't go back on those. The way I understand it is on procedural ordinances, the 125-2C says that they have to comply with the procedural ordinances, right, that are in place.
They were in place when they started. That's not so much in your ordinance, that's what, how state law is basically said. You can impose certain new rules after something's in process, but that has to be connected to the health, safety, and welfare that we've all talked about so often.
So 125-21, it says that these studies, that's what the new ordinances say, that we're supposed to receive these studies with the preliminary plats, right?
Under the new, yeah, anything under the new
Under
ordinance.
the new ordinance.
Yes.
Which the new ordinances procedurally applied, today applied on July 13th, right?
No. this is
I'm just trying to make sure I understand it right, that's the way I understood it to be.
Right.
Design, no, procedure, yes.
Yes.
Is the floor open?
Is the floor open? Apparently you get 15 minutes again.
I'm gonna be very brief and hold the rest of the comments. Gary Murphy, representative of property, quality engineering and survey. So, the code, the intermediate code, at the last meeting, yes, required those studies to be part of that. The new code that is now in effect today, Chad, please correct me if I'm saying anything wrong, we've been dissecting these things, the same thing as y'all. But as a stage 2 preliminary plat, this is like the old conceptual plan of plat 1. The stage 3 has all the studies and everything come back in front of it, so, that's how, we had conversations and try to make sure that we made sense of all that. And so from a procedural type standpoint, I think we meet those codes today as well. The other thing I just wanted to make sure we point out, in our 60-day calculation, which expired on July 27th, we left out June 1st to July 13th in our calculation, and we still meet the 60-day criteria. And so, we weren't considering that time frame, when we're looking at this. Now, I know overall, it wasn't right so forth because of that, ambiguity. We wanted to just make sure that we left that out in our calculations, and so that's what we're here today.
Mr. Idell.
Let Mr. Idell go first, that's fine. He gets a new 15 minutes, right? Go ahead. Go ahead.
15 per side.
15 minutes total, no matter who speaks. If you burn 15 minutes, we're done.
Last group got 30.
No, they have 15 minutes apiece.
I didn't have it wrote
Per
down.
person?
No.
No, ma'am.
Per side.
Per side.
That's what I was asking.
Yes, ma'am, you got 15
Okay,
minutes per
that's
side.
all I was asking. Okay, we were saying the same thing. So I guess I could direct this question either to Mr. Burns, since he seems knowledgeable about it, or to Mr. Moody. Why was the 60-day law put in place?
I have no idea.
So the advice that I was given by Mr. Cassio last meeting was that the law was put in place to protect the developer, right, from a commission just discriminating against somebody that they wanted to pick on, right? Kick the can down the road, don't take any action. They're meeting the letter of the law and they just can't get approved for anything, right? Which seems reasonable to me.
Right, that's seemingly what the intent is, I agree with that. So sometimes the planning commission is just paralyzed because of public outcry about a project, so they take no action.
Okay, so that being said, the deferral that was granted at the meeting back in May was granted graciously by this commission to give them a chance to fix their signs. The deferral that was granted by this commission at the June meeting, was June 6th, I believe, again, was gracious allowance by this commission at their request, as we have on video, repeated requests from them, to get the property boundary situation straightened out. So the deferral has not been because of this commission wanting to kick the can down the road and not take action. It's been because you've been abundantly gracious to them to go get their ducks in a row, which they finally did in June, maybe, so around June 18th is when they would have had to submit for the July meeting, correct? Do I have those, am I right on the dates, close enough? So what I would like to understand is what the motion to approve tonight is approving. So if we're going from 60 days from back in the April submittal, the Valere that exists today is completely different than what was submitted in April. So if you all would like to automatically approve Valere as it was submitted in April, based on 60 days having expired, then you are approving Valere in violation of the sign ordinance. If you would like to approve the following month and the second iteration of Valere, then you're approving the Valere that was on Mr. Gary's property. So I would like to understand which version of it we're automatically approving tonight. If we're automatically approving the third version, it's only been 46 days, hasn't been 60. So which one are we approving? And I think Mr. Burns, it would be prudent to clarify that abundantly in your motion. I also would like to understand if the June sixth meeting minutes have been approved. Because if they have, then the request for the deferral from the developer is in writing in the meeting minutes.